Hello, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Rebecca Anand. I'm the co-founder and managing partner of Infinite Learning. I'm delighted to introduce today Kate Hinchliffe from Impact First. She's going to be leading our webinar today on the subject of leading change. For anyone who's been involved in any leadership course of any style whatsoever, particularly the national professional qualifications, you will know how important and challenging at times leading change can be. So we're delighted to be running this course later in the month, in November, in fact, with Kate, and we thought it would be really great to give you a little taste of what that course is going to be like through a webinar today. Now, just a few protocols before we move on. At the moment, you're all on mute and cameras off, but we do encourage you, please, to ask questions as you go along. You can use the chat function for that, and we've allowed time for a Q&A session at the end. Equally, you can wait until the end and ask questions then, but please don't be shy in doing that. Other questions we often get asked: will I get a certificate? Yes, you will. That will be sent to you automatically tomorrow, around about 5 p.m. A certificate of attendance at the webinar and a link to a recording of the video as well. We also send with that a little survey just to get some feedback on the webinar. So if you could just take a couple of minutes to let us know what you thought, that would be much appreciated. So that's it from me for now. I'm going to hand you over to Kate, who will introduce herself far better than I could, I'm sure, but needless to say, she has a wealth of experience in this field and has been delivering training around leadership on a wider scale for many years. So you're in very capable hands. Over to you, Kate. Very much looking forward to the webinar.
Okay, lovely. Thank you for that introduction, Rebecca. I do feel like you've built me up a bit now, and I've got a lot to live up to. But I'm really excited to be working with Infinite Learning, so thank you for the opportunity to do this. Most of my work at the moment is with different universities in the UK, working with people from all walks of life, although I do tend to focus on managers and leaders in schools in the courses that I'm delivering. So as Rebecca says, I do have a lot of personal experience of change management, and also from a teaching point of view, I do a lot of leadership and management training focusing on change because it is such an important part of our lives, as Rebecca has just said. Now, this is only a short session, and it's just a taster really for the two-day course that we've got running in November. So it is just a taster to give you a sense of what training that I deliver is like and what kind of experience you might have. And the first thing to say is that my training is always interactive. It's not the kind of training where you can just sort of kick back with a nice drink and take a bit of a break, I'm afraid. So one of the first things I would like you to do, if you don't mind, is just to type your name and where you are from in the chat bar. I'm assuming you'll be able to find that, and just put that in so I can see who I've got, see if I recognise anybody, because I've been around a good while, so I quite often recognise people in these kind of things. Lovely, thank you, Helen, for starting us off with that. That's fabulous. Thank you. And also, whilst you're doing that, if you haven't already, could you please grab a piece of paper and a pencil? It's not very high tech, I know, but you're going to want to take some notes. So please grab a scrap bit of paper is fine, and a pencil, because I am going to be asking you to do some things as we go through. Okay, lovely. I'm going to start the show, as it were. So hopefully now you're all seeing the slides that I've got there. So leading change then, what have we got to say about leading change? Well, one of the first things that I wanted to talk to you about was the context of change at the moment. And I think really there are three things to say about change and the context of change. And one is that the level of change that we've seen recently is just unprecedented. You know, we've all had a similar experience over the last 18 months, and the pace of change there has been rapid. It's been unheard of, and there have been so many changes happening to how we work, how we live our lives, and I can't see that stopping anytime soon. So the change, the level of change is unprecedented at the moment. And the pace of change as well. It just seems to be continually accelerating, and some of that's driven by technology or political changes, social changes. And I've been working in schools and for the British government, and I've been leading change for as long as I can remember. But nonetheless, I do feel as if the pace of change is just picking up and getting faster and faster. And I heard a quotation the other day saying that because of all the pace of changes, if organisations aren't able to keep up with that and to change themselves to respond to that, then basically they perish, they become obsolete. The key message was you have to change or you will perish, which sounds very dramatic, doesn't it? But I think it just brings home how important leading and managing change is in any organisation at the moment. And the last thing to say about is the complexity of change. There's rarely one change happening at a time anymore. There are lots of changes all impacting on each other that we're having to juggle and manage at the same time. So that's just a bit of background, really. So the aim of the session that you signed up for today is for you to develop an understanding of the complexity of change that I've just alluded to, and how that impacts on the level and type of change management and change leadership that is required. So that's what we're going to be looking at today. But before we do all of that, I want to tell you a story. And I've borrowed this story from Julie Hodges, who's the Associate Dean for the MBA and the DBA programs at my old university. And she tells this story that I'm going to borrow from her. And there are similar stories that you may have heard. There's a similar story called Who Moved My Cheese by Dr. Spencer Johnson. But we're going with Julie's little story today, just because, as I say, she's from my old university. And what I need, please, is a name for this chap. I don't know if this is going to work, but we've got this person here. And I would like a name for this person in our story. Can anybody type one in? Anybody get a name? Otherwise, I'm going to have to give him Dave from Helen. Thank you, Helen, very much. Okay, fabulous. So here is Dave, and I want to tell you the story about Dave. So here is Dave. He's on his little island there, beautiful lush grass, looking out over the seaside, and he's very, very comfortable on his island. He likes it there. He knows what it's like there. He understands it, and he's been there a very long time. But then sadly, in Dave's world, there's suddenly a crisis. Now, this crisis hasn't been planned for. It's not something he was expected. And at first, Dave just stands there and he hopes that this fire is just going to go away. And he just waits there. But unfortunately for Dave, this fire, this crisis, and if we think about that in an organisational context, this change looming upon Dave is not going away. He can't avoid it. It's not going anywhere at all. And so he has a choice. Some people, when they're faced with this crisis, this need to change, some people will want to leave. And there's the ladder there, and Dave could climb down the ladder and get in the speedboat and disappear. But some people want to stay. And our chap Dave, he's decided he's going to stay. And he can see across the water, he can see the new place to go. He can see somewhere that looks a little bit like his island, but not exactly like it. It's not somewhere he knows. It's not somewhere he's comfortable with, but he's got his eye on it and he's a little bit interested. But we need to think, what is going to make Dave want to take that leap and leave the place where he was comfortable, where everything was familiar, where he was happy? What is going to help him leave there and go to the new island? Now, I've put a cafe on there because I'm a big coffee drinker. I've got a cup of coffee with me here. And we need to think, what is going to make Dave want to leave the place where he's comfortable and go to somewhere new. And it has to be attractive and it has to be relevant to him. And in an organisational sense, what we're talking about there probably is a new strategy, a new organisational strategy. But whatever it is, in this story it's a cafe, it's got to be attractive enough to make him want to move. So I've put cafe, it could have been a pub, it could have been a football match, it could have been the theatre, I don't know. But it's got to be something that's attractive to Dave. And they have to be able to articulate what's in it for me. Whoever you're asking to change needs to understand what's in it for me. And for Dave, he likes a good cup of coffee. So this new strategy is attractive, but it's still on a different island and it's still across the sea. So the boat's gone now. Dave has lost his opportunity to go if he wants. He's decided to stay. But the move to this new place, which is sort of looking quite attractive, actually has some danger for him. There are some sharks swimming around at the bottom. Can anybody give me some ideas in the chat function, if you can, for what will make Dave move? How can we help him get to this new island? Any thoughts or ideas? Just type them in if you can. Oh, we've got some quiet in the chat box. Well, one of the things that people quite often suggest is that we put a bridge. We actually build a bridge for Dave to travel from the place where he's comfortable, but there's a crisis happening and he knows there's got to be changes. We build a bridge. And in an organisational sense, this is our change plan. So this would be the plan that as a change leader, you would create. Now, if you were Dave, you've got this bridge, but what would you still be concerned about? Yes, there's a bridge, but we've still got sharks underneath. We've got a cafe, we've got a strategy, something that's quite attractive, but that bridge looks pretty long. It looks pretty rickety. It doesn't look very secure. So we need to think, what would he still be concerned about? If anybody can type any ideas in for me. Thank you, Sinead. What have we got? Cross the bridge. I'm going to click on it. Let's hope this doesn't do anything strange. It hasn't done, but it just says cross the bridge. At the end, I think it probably says, Sinead, it's actually cut off, and I don't think I can make it any bigger.
Kate, it says cross the bridge at the right time.
At the right time. Lovely, thank you. And then we've got somebody here putting stability in, putting a safety net and growth. Lovely, thank you for those. So crossing the bridge at the right time, exactly, knowing when to do it, when is the right time for them. And one of the things that can help in those scenarios, let me just click back on my slide, is sometimes if we have somebody else, Dave too, at the other side of the bridge, and they're going to be in an organisation, they would be your change champion potentially, and they would be the kind of person who would help and support people, let them know when the right time to cross is, and encourage them. Can you think what kind of attributes they would have? What kind of behaviours Dave too might need if they're going to help and support Dave in getting across this bridge? Give me some ideas again, please. Yeah, and Sinead's saying there, don't cross too soon. So we've got Dave too at the other side. He's got to be understanding. Thank you very much. A mentor, yes, a mentor. Very good attributes to have there, to be a mentor. So a change champion, we'll learn about change champions in the 2 days we do in November, and being a mentor, offering that stability, if you like, helping them know when the right time to cross. Okay, now sometimes we can offer Dave a helicopter. So something, instead of having to go across the bridge, maybe we could have a helicopter. And in an organisational sense, this could be a cultural change programme that's running alongside the other change that we're wanting Dave to make, or it could be an organisational wide leadership programme, again, that's running alongside the change that we want Dave to engage with. But just like helicopters, things like that can be very expensive, so they're not always there. And just like in the films where you see people marooned on islands and the helicopter comes up and they wave and they're excited, and sadly the helicopter doesn't see them and just flies off into the distance and still leaves them standing there waving. And that's what's happened to Dave this time. So the helicopter has started to go away. We have some other suggestions as well. We had a suggestion of a safety net. So on our bridge now, not quite a safety net, we will come on to that, but we've added a life belt. So something that's offering that extra bit of safety for Dave as he crosses this bridge from one place to another, as he goes along the change journey. And we've also put a chair there, and somebody else put about growth opportunities. And the chair there has two purposes. It is a space to rest halfway across this journey, because it is a long bridge. It's somewhere to rest and to look back and to reflect on the learning that's taken place so far for half the journey. So it is that reflection and that growth and that learning time, that learning space. And also the chair offers a space for Dave to sit and to celebrate what's happened so far, to celebrate the bit of the journey that he's already taken. And that's really important in a change journey, that chance to stop, take stock and do some celebration, celebrate some quick wins on the journey. And as somebody else said, look, the sharks are starting to get fed up now. They're not as excited anymore. They're starting to disappear under the waves. And as I think it's Neela, apologies if I said your name wrong, but said about the safety net. So this is something else that we could add, this level of assurance and reassurance that we can add. So the story of Dave hopefully highlights that the central need when you're leading change is to consider how we actually engage with people, how we engage with people and how we build our change plan while thinking about that, and by making sure that we engage with the people and take them on the journey of change with us. And that's what the two-day course will focus on. It'll focus on how you build the bridge. What does the bridge need to look like? What does it need to contain? What kind of chair is in the middle? How long should you sit on the chair? What kind of life belt would you have? What does the net look like? What does Dave 2 look like? Is the cafe the right thing? And that's what the 2 days will build upon. Okay, so that's just a bit of context really about Dave and that central message. About context about Dave. It's context about change, not Dave. Let's not get obsessed. But it's about change and that central message that it's all about people. But let's leave Dave there for a moment and assume that he's going to be okay. Let's just leave him there. And let's turn the focus onto you now and reflecting on your experience of change. So what I'd like you to do, please, is think of a change that happened to you at work. So it's better if it's something that you weren't leading. If it was something that you were kind of subjected to, I suppose. So a change that happened to you at work, and you've got hopefully a scrap piece of paper and your pencil, and just make some brief notes about the situation. Now, as I said at the beginning, I like my training to be interactive. So if this was during the 2 days that we're going to have together, you would be put in breakout rooms and you would be doing this in pairs or small groups. But we don't have that facility today, so just make some brief notes of your own. And what I want you to think very carefully about is what triggered the change. So for Dave, there was a fire that triggered the change, and that could be a metaphor for anything and everything, really. So you just reflect back on that change that happened to you and just think, what triggered the change? And then I also want you to think about the impact that the change had on you. What impact did it have on you? And that could be in the way you felt. It could be in the way you had to do things differently. It could be that it changed your job. I don't know, because changes are very personal things, and how you experience change is very personal. But write those things down. I'm just going to give you a few moments to do that. Just make sure you get some notes written down so we can draw on them. Okay, let's have a check and see if we've got. Okay, lovely. Okay, so I'm going to assume that you've all managed to do that. And let's just move it on and just give you a little bit of background here. I never used to like this diagram. You can see there I use it for another course that I teach on. But this is Senior and Fleming's organisation model. And what Senior and Fleming have done here is they have drawn a picture to represent every organisation, really. So it's a generic model. It's not specific to schools. What I try to do in my training is think of schools broadly as organisations, so that the learning you do in the 2 days is drawn from the business world and put into the context of schools. That's how I work, because I want to give you the learning that has a currency wherever you are. And that could be working in different organisations. Plus, we have to recognise that for most people, a school, although it has different ways of thinking about things, is an organisation and it is a business at the end of the day. So this model comes from the business world, if you like. And I find it quite a useful model just to show how the organisation itself, that's the bit in the yellow there, it has 2 elements to it. So it's got the formal subsystem. So those are the things that are quite tangible and you can see them, you can see the structure. Your goals of the organisation are articulated in some way and probably written in a mission statement at the front of the school brochure. There's a strategy, whether that's a school development plan or whatever. So there's the formal things that are there and exist. And then we've got the informal subsystem, the politics, the culture. And leadership and culture are very, very firmly linked. So the leadership and the kind of culture that leads to. And I was lucky enough a few years ago now, you can tell how old I am, I seem to have done everything in my life by now, but a few years ago I worked for the Centre of Educational Leadership at Manchester University, and one of my colleagues there was a chap called Jerry Egan, who works in the States and works with big organisations looking at making them more effective and changing rather than perishing. and he's written a book about it, and he calls this little red circle here, this red blob at the bottom there, he calls that the shadow side of the organisation, which I really like. That really captures it for me, the shadow side, the unwritten things that are there within an organisation. And then around about some kind of smudgy green, we've got the environment. So the context that your school or organisation is working within. Okay, so the political environment, what are the politics like that your school works within? I'm talking externally here, not internally. What are the politics? What economic environment is there? What are the social norms in the environment where your school is, and so on? What's the legal framework for where your school, your organisation is? And then we have things like materials and resources coming in. Now, these are terms that start to feel a bit strange when you're talking about schools, but at the end of the day, you know, we've got children coming in here, we've got teaching staff coming in, we've got other staff, and we do have resources as well, of course, coming in. But anything that kind of goes into the school to either be changed in some way, like the children go into the school to be educated and to be developed as individuals and come out as an output, if we're thinking about it in these terms, or the other things that are there in a school, like the teachers, like the support staff, who are helping to educate and make those changes. And then at the other side, we've got meeting organisational goals. In an organisation, we would look for employee satisfaction, just as you would in schools, and the outputs are things like, we probably think more about outcomes, about having children progressing and meeting their potential. And triggers for change can come from any of these places. And probably whilst I was going through that, you probably started to see where the triggers that you've written down were fitting. You know, were they internal? Were they part of the formal subsystem or the shadow side? Did they come externally? And so on. So that's a nice model. I do like to bring these models in to any learning that I deliver. Here's another way looking at it, triggers for change. Just another way of organising it. So we've got forces that are external to the organisation. So again, market forces. You might think that's a strange expression to use, but you know, we've got new direction for businesses, market forces, what expectations are out there in terms of parents and children, and any of your funding organisations. There'll be market forces, or just whether there's another school nearby to you that is drawing pupils and parents from the same pool of individuals. And looking down there, you know, consumer requirements. Maybe there's a change in terms of requirements for the subjects that are taught, or the consumers, your clients, the parents, the children, wanting after school clubs. There's always another way of looking at business speak that relates it back to schools. We would do a lot more of that during the 2 days. And some of you have probably recognised, some of you have done any training before, anything to do with the National College, as was, will recognise that the external forces really come under the pestle, the handy tool you have where you look at the political forces, economic, social, technological, legal and environmental, a pestle. And we dig into that in more detail during the 2 days. And then we've got forces that are internal. Now we've got profitability there. Again, that will be an issue, but also you might want to think about that in terms of maybe there have been some poor results at the school in particular subjects. That's another way of thinking about profitability in the school environment, and so on. Okay, a dramatic happening can be a lot of things. I've been working with a school recently where they've had a death in service of a head teacher, and that's been a dramatic happening that's led to some serious changes within a school. Okay, so what I'd like you to just do now is just think about those things and see if you can put in the chat box, when you thought about your change, can you identify what the trigger for change was, please? And type it in the chat box, what you think your trigger for change was. Let's see what we've got, please. Who's going to be brave and put something in here? Oh, you've all gone really shy. Come on, Sinead. Okay, thank you. Change of management. Thank you very much. And a dramatic happening. Okay, thank you for those. Have we got any others to come in? Okay. So it will normally come from one of those things. It will normally come from one of those. Sometimes in the first instance, it's not always obvious where the trigger for change has come from. So the one that's been typed in there, a change of management, that's a really interesting one, because one of the things you quite often have to do is use a tool called a 5 whys that some of you may know about already. But again, it's something we'll look at during the 2 days. But to actually get underneath things, to actually find out the root of the issue. So if you've looked at those triggers and you've thought, it's not one of those, mine isn't one of those, or maybe where you've got change of management, like one of our participants has, and you think, but why? Why have we got a change of management? And then you might say, because the old management wasn't very good. But why? Why do you know that? Because our results weren't very good. But why? And you keep asking why, until you can get to the root. So if your trigger doesn't fit any of those things on there, just try asking why. Why a few times and see if you end up with one of those. It's quite an interesting task to do. Okay, so another activity. Did anybody think, even when you've done the 5 whys potentially on whatever your trigger was, did anybody identify any other items or events that could or should be added to that list that I had? I've put it up there again so you don't have to look back on the slide. Did anybody think that there was something else? Student performance, yes. Thank you, Johannes. That's an important one. And again, you know, student performance doesn't fit neatly with a business model, but that could be profitability, because that's kind of, you know, the difference that you make, the collateral that you create. Thank you. Somebody else has said there about conflict between operations. Yeah. And that's on our list, isn't it? I've got a little cursor whizzing all over now. Job role and moving departments. Yeah. And again, but why? So there could be some other things that need to be added to the list. And I think what Johannes has shown us there is that if you want to create your own one of these models, and I always encourage my students to do that, because we take different academics models, but it's much better if we can adapt them to ourselves. And you might want to remove profitability and put in their student performance, or add it as a separate box. So always space to add things like that. But that's great, thank you for that. Now, one of the things is that the way in which a trigger impacts on a situation is going to depend on its source. So when I'm working with organisations, and a lot of academics concur about this, is that internally generated triggers are more likely to be managed more proactively than those that come and are external to the organisation. Now, why do you think that is? Why do you think that is? Just have a think. Why would that be the case? See if anybody types anything in for me. Give you a moment to think about it. Inside your comfort zone. Thank you, Sinead. Yes.
Yeah, so I think you can't read it all, Kate, so I'm just going to step in to help here. So Sinead said, inside your comfort zone, easier to react to something that is internal.
Yeah, absolutely, Sinead. It is easier to react to something that's internal. Emotionally, we feel better about it. And the way organisations are constructed or tend to be constructed, they're much better set up to deal with those that are internally generated, those triggers that are internally generated. And we would look in great detail at why that is so. One of the key things when we're looking at a particular model by Cotter, who does a lot of work on change management and change leadership, is that you get sponsorship. If something's internally triggered, you are more likely to get senior sponsorship for the change, which is so central and so important to the success of change. So during our 2 days, we would unpick that in much more detail. As I say, this is just a taster, just to give you an idea that we'd be doing lots of activities and thinking about things in different ways. Now, I want to share another tool with you, which I really enjoy. So I hope you like this. I love anything like this where you can start categorizing things and putting them into a space and understanding changes better and helping by that depth of understanding, being better able to lead and manage the change. Now, our story of Dave that we saw earlier has illustrated just how incredibly important it is to take into account the personal side of change. It really, really is important. So on the axis going up, I never know whether it's the X or Y, I think it's the X, we've got people and systems interface increasing. So the more a change impacts on an individual in terms of changing what they have to do, the more complex it will become. Now, people don't resist change. What they resist is being changed. So the more something is asking them to change themselves, the more complex it is going to become. And so that's a really important axis on this particular tool that we've got here. Okay, so I want you to do something for me to illustrate that. And I can't see you doing it, so I have to trust you. I would like you, please, just to fold your arms. Some of you might have done this before. Just fold your arms now, just as you normally would. Fold your arms. And then let's just have a look down. So look down at your folded arms, don't move them. And if your right hand is the one that's poking up through the other arm, and you can see your right hand, whereas your left hand is tucked away under your armpit or whatever, what I'd like you to do is swap it over. So if your right hand's the one poking out, re-thread your hands so that your left hand is the one that's poking out, and vice versa. Just do that for me. It's quite hard. I'm struggling here, but I think I've managed it. I think I've managed it. Okay, now if you have managed to do it, not everybody does, I have to tell you. Can you please, I'll let you unfold your arms now. Can you just type in that question box how it feels? How does it feel, please? Just type your reaction to that into the question box. Oh, look, Sinead's helping me with my Y and X axis. Bless you, Sinead. Thank you so much. give me some feedback about how it felt doing that with your arms, please. Different from your Hannah's. Thank you. What else? Did you like it? Did it feel good? Was it enjoyable? Give me some of your emotions. What's Carmela said? No difference in terms?
In terms of comfort.
Oh, right. Okay. Anybody else?
She said, I was surprised by that. That's Carmela.
Yeah, well, me too. You must be very flexible. You must be very young as well, Carmela. I'll tell you why in a moment. You must be very young. Takes a bit of getting used to it, felt uncomfortable. Yeah, feels uncomfortable. And the only reason you fold your arms in a particular way is habit. Nobody told you put your right hand on the top or your left hand on the top. It's just a habit that you've got into, and you've been doing it for years and years, some for more years than others. I'm going to assume that Carmel's about, very, very young and hasn't formed such a fierce habit as I have as I approach my 60s.
So I won't say anything, Ella, don't worry.
So it's habit. People have habits, and changing something as simple as folding your arms is really uncomfortable. And imagine changing somebody's job description or asking them to do something in a different way. And as we know from Dave as well, there's the fear of the unknown, there's the fear of negative impact. So there's a lot of reasons why the more people are being asked to change, the more complex your job as a change leader and manager is. And then on the other side, we've got the complexity and variability of the change environment. So I now know from Sinead that this is the x-axis. All right. So the more messy and the change environment is that you're working in, a bit like with COVID, where it was really complex. It changed from day to day in terms of what we should and shouldn't be doing and how we needed to manage it. We didn't know whether we were coming or going. And so that made changing, managing and leading the changes so much more complicated than something that we know about and is fixed. Now watch the language here in this model. Any academic models that we look at, you really have to concentrate on the language, because down at the bottom here, where there's not much impact on the individual and the change environment is fairly settled and straightforward, they call that hard and mechanistic. Now they don't mean hard, difficult, they mean hard as in fixed. You know what you're dealing with, you can grasp it, it's not going to change. They actually mean simple, not hard. Okay, they mean hard in that not amorphous, it's fixed. You can see it, you can hold it, it won't change or run through your fingers. And at the other end of the spectrum, we've got soft, complex, and I've heard this, and I like to call it this as well, messy change, where you just can't seem to get a hold of it, and you're asking people to change and all the issues that that brings with it. Okay, so that's that. Oh, I've lost my little cursor. Hang on while I wave my cursor around. There it is. So this Tropics test relates to that. So I want you to do something for me in a moment, but let's just go through this. So it's called the Tropics Test. I hope you appreciate that lovely picture. It took me ages to find that. And it's called the Tropics Test because it's just an acronym, TROPICS. And again, this is just your way of getting underneath the change and understanding how complex it is to start informing how you need to manage it. So the first thing you need to think about is the time scale. So if it's clear, short to medium term, the change that you're going to have to effect, then that would be down at the hard end of the change spectrum. If the timescale is ill-defined, it's medium, it's long-term, it's getting up to the soft and the messy bit of the change spectrum. Because the longer a change takes, the more chance there is for something to go wrong. You know, if you're just nipping to your neighbours next door nothing can really go wrong, can it? You think, oh, I'll be there in a minute. Then you're there in a minute, unless you fall over because your slippers have got snagged or something. But you know you're only nipping next door, and if you say you're going to be there in 5 minutes, you will be there in 5 minutes. But if you're going to visit your in-laws, I mean, I know a lot of you will probably fly back to the UK or, you know, other home countries, and it takes a long time, and it can be quite difficult to say it'll definitely be this time, or I'll definitely get there at this time. You might get stuck in a traffic jam. Anything could happen. Your car might break down, whatever. So we need to have a look at each of these factors in turn, and you can see kind of the descriptors, and we're going to put them onto the change spectrum. So this is what we're going to do. Now, Rebecca did put the Tropics Test PDF up there for you, but you know, you've got a piece of paper, you've got a pencil, and I'm always very keen that these are tools that you can have with you, and you don't need printouts, you don't need to have a booklet there. You know, as long as you've got a pencil and a piece of paper, you can quickly do these with your colleagues. So this is the activity, that's what the PDF looks like if you did manage to download it. But again, you don't even need to draw it very well. But what I'd like you to do now, please, is think about a current change or a change initiative, just something that's facing your business unit at the moment. It doesn't have to be the whole school, it could be just your department or your business unit. And just find one, doesn't matter which one, just one. We're just testing using a tool. And then what I would like you to do is, if on time scale you answer yes to hard, that it's clear, short to medium term, don't move anywhere on that scale, just stay where you are. If you answer yes to ill-defined, medium to long term, jump up 1. So every time you answer yes to hard, you don't move. Every time you answer yes to the soft and messy, you can use some latitude here if you want. You could go halfway up. You go half if you think it's in the middle, or go 1 if you think it totally describes it. Okay? So just have a little go at that. I've talked through timescales, resources, they can be funding, they can be time, of course. Time's a huge resource. And if you don't really know how much something's going to cost, and it's changing all the time, you don't know where you are with it, it's soft and messy, you jump up 1. Objectives, if it's very clear and quantifiable and you know we need to do X by Y time, that's nice and hard. But if it's subjective in terms of what people think the objectives are, and it's a bit visionary and out there, that's likely to be, you know, it's quite personal, it's likely to be soft and messy. Perceptions of it, is it shared by everybody affected, or does it create some conflicts of interest? Again, evoking some of those emotional responses. The interest in it, we're talking about stakeholders here, something we will dig into in the 2 days as well. Those people who are interested, is it limited to a small group and quite well defined? You know who needs to be involved and who's interested? Or are there loads of people interested and we don't really know why or how they are, and so on. So just do that for me, please. Just do that. And then when you've got your number, it'll be between 0 and 7. Can you just type that into the question, please, so I can just see where we get to? Type me a number in. Let's have a look. Rebecca and I played with the idea of doing a poll for this, and during the training we will use a poll because we'll use Zoom, and you can do polls there. But here, if you could just type the number in for me, that would be really useful and helpful. I'm hoping you're all still there and you haven't run away. You're not spending too long drawing this diagram. Okay. Go on, somebody be brave and put me a number in. Come on, Sinead, I've come to rely on you. And Johannes, I'm relying on you. And Carmela.
There we go, we have an answer. 3 from Sinead.
Thank you. I've lost my little cursor again now. I keep waving it around to see a 3. Okay, thank you for that. So if we had time, and we will do obviously during the 2 days, what we would then do is kind of unpick those people who've maybe got 0 or a 1, or even Sinead with her 3 there. Carmela's embarrassed to say. We'll get over that, Carmela. You come along to these 2 days, you'll stop being embarrassed about things. And we would unpick those people who are perhaps saying a 0 or a 1, or those who are saying a 7, and we'd look at the difference and how that impacts on how you need to lead and manage the change. So today we've just been able to dip our toe in really and start to begin to understand the change in terms of its triggers, whether it's messy or hard, and working those things out is the first step. And we've got this lovely quotation here from Machiavelli from 1532. Nobody tell me I'm not up to date. But here we've got a lovely quotation from Machiavelli. And actually finding out whether something is hard or messy and finding out what the triggers for the change are is actually the first step in reducing the perils that Machiavelli talks about here and securing the success of introducing a new order of things. So hopefully your interest has been piqued by the few minutes we've been able to spend together today, and if they are, then please do come along to the 2 days. I know Rebecca will tell you more information about it as well, and we'll look at all the other steps and practical tools that you can use. And as I say, it'll be very hands-on. You'll start using these tools sort of from the first few minutes really to help you in your role as a change leader. And I've got one last slide, which is just about questions. I've deliberately not left a long time for questions. Did you notice that, Rebecca?
Yes. They're a little bit reluctant, but please, if you have any questions, you can type them into the chat box, or if you would prefer to unmute yourself and just ask a question, we would welcome that as well.
Shall I stop sharing the screen, do you think, Rebecca, so we've got some faces?
Yes, so they can actually see you.
Yeah.
So if you want to unmute, you now have control. The power.
There we are with me. Sorry, Rebecca.
I'm just going to go into the questions to see if there's anything here. No, nothing at the moment. Just give people time to. Someone's been left a comment. I'm not sure if it's a question or a comment. Change is the only constant thing. We need to be prepared to embrace it anytime it shows up. We can also be a positive change agents as teachers. Thank you, Kate, for the webinar. That is from Asuko. I hope I pronounced that correctly. Thank you very much for that comment. Kate, would you like to respond?
Yeah, absolutely. Change is the only constant. And I can't remember the chap's name who originally said that. It was Heralakis or somebody. Asuko probably knows better than I do. But absolutely. And obviously in a teaching role, definitely. And the course itself will look at how some of these tools and techniques can be used in the staff room with the children and young people to get them engaged in leading their own changes as well. So, from a pedagogical point of view, it has a definite relevance. So thank you for that comment, really helpful and useful.
Yeah, I mean, just some feedback from me. I think what was brilliant about that training, Kate, is exactly as you said it was going to be. This will be a very interactive session. So even with a webinar, which is quite challenging in such a short space of time, you really got me thinking about some change issues in my context. And I think what was really important is that we're talking about kind of leading change. So as leaders in your schools, you were asked to be reflective, and when we run all our national professional qualifications in leadership, the big thrust of that is the importance on self-reflection. That in fact, they go as far as to say that you will never ever be a good leader if you do not manage to self-reflect. So, you know, reflect on your own capabilities as an individual, but also in the context in which you exist. So thank you for that. Thank you for making us think at kind of 4 o'clock over here our time, nearly 5 o'clock now. That was really good. And I love the story of Dave. It's actually quite amusing because my husband is called Dave. So I just kind of kept picturing him. I said, don't walk across the scary bridge. I don't want him to fall in.
We protected him in the end, Rebecca. He was fine.
And again, I think, you know, using tools and techniques and stories like that. Actually, we do a lot of work with early years and primary, and the power of narrative and story used to such effect there. And I think everyone will remember that as a result now. Certainly, I will be going home and talking about that with my husband and telling him I was nearly eaten by sharks tonight. But I'm aware that we are very close to 5 o'clock, so I just wanted to give you some information about the programme. The booking deadline, I think, is the 13th of October, so in a week's time. So do go have a look on our website and you'll see the details there. It's a 2-day course, so it's not face-to-face, but it is as much as we can make it, rather than, you know, an hour here or an hour there, which is a model we also work with. But with this particular course, we wanted that continuity of group learning. So it's an 11 o'clock start with a 5:30 finish. That might actually make it easier for you to access. It requires less cover. And that's on Monday the 8th of November and Monday the 15th. So do go on and have a look. Hopefully you've had a good taste of what's to come, and that's exciting, and hopefully you'll want to come back for more. In the meantime, just a big thank you to Kate for your time and for sharing the tools and techniques, and of course the PowerPoint and some of those strategies will be sent to you in an email as well. So I hope you found it all useful. Thank you everyone that's attended today, and we look forward to seeing you at our next webinar and hopefully on the course with Kate.
That would be great, yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Have a nice evening, everyone. Take care.
Bye. Bye. Hope to see you again soon. Thank you.